Under Arizona law, these plants are medicine for patients with cancer, glaucoma, Lou Gehrig's disease, and more. But there's nothing in Arizona law to ensure this medicine isn't contaminated and to prevent lab results like these.
Results ranged from a low level to a very, very high level. It should be pulled off the shelf, absolutely.
CBS 5 Investigates found mold on medical marijuana sold here in the Valley.
In some states, these mold levels found by a lab would not be legal. But as Derek Stahl reports, when it comes to contaminants on medical cannabis, here in Arizona, anything goes.
So these guys over there are mixing soil. We have our own proprietary blend. We mix our own soils.
Our investigation started before we knew it in October, when Arizona's family was invited to tour one of the state's largest dispensaries in Canto Green Cross in Phoenix. Not long after that report, former employees began reaching out to say we missed something.
I know for a fact that that's mold growing on the wall. I mean, you can just see it right there. That's black mold growing on the wall.
Was it widely known at the dispensary that there were issues with mold? Do other employees know about this?
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
Matthew Love and Zachary Padilla say they had never met before this interview, but both worked at Encanto Green Cross months apart.
I've seen other medical programs, and the fact that we were doing some of these things, it was honestly it was sickening.
It's mold. They have a mold problem.
Padilla was a security guard. He started snapping pictures and filing reports with his supervisors in January. Mold outside grow rooms, streaks of condensation on the inside. He reported mold again in February, then again in March.
Can we get an update on where we're at with this? And then it would be crickets, no response, no update. And as I would walk around, I would notice these problems weren't fixed. These problems were getting worse.
Encanto started cleaning the walls by the time Love was hired as a cannabis trimmer, but he says he regularly came across moldy marijuana.
There's almost not a single day that I've gone by not having to see one of the trimmers wearing a mask while they're trimming because of like the smell or the odors from the moldy flower that we would trim. I was having personal adverse reactions to some of the flower, like I would develop like rashes and start itching out of nowhere some days.
He says all the trimmers were under pressure to turn in a pound of trimmed cannabis in every 8-hour shift.
So many people will be in a rush, and when you take the moldy flower out, that subtracts from your total and that affects your rate a bit. Some trimmers would just trim it and throw it into their actual trim bins to be weighed for regular.
Both men say they were fired after raising concerns. They also say the Arizona Department of Health Services came in to inspect Encanto during this time, but the state's findings are secret.
The statute prohibits the Department of Health Services from giving whatever enforcement actions they're taking. You can't find out about it.
Will Humble is the former director of the department.
The compliance and enforcement, the inspection records, all those things are kept secret. And it's not the ADHS's fault. That's the voter-approved language says that.
Encanto Green Cross sent us lab results showing its products passed safety tests. They screen for pesticides and do a visual inspection with a microscope for foreign matter, including mold. But 2 lab directors told us those visual tests can miss a lot of microorganisms. So we decided to do some tests that look deeper. We arranged to have a medical marijuana cardholder buy 4 different strains of cannabis flower products at Encanto, then took the samples to an independent testing facility in Phoenix called Delta Verde Laboratory, and we hired them to run tests for what's called total yeast and mold. Days later, the results are in.
All of the samples were positive for yeast and mold, which is normal.
Yeast and mold are just about everywhere. It's the amount that matters. We found medical journals documenting a handful of cases where patients with compromised immune systems got infections like fungal pneumonia from moldy marijuana. But there is currently no universally accepted standard for just how much mold is safe. Arizona has no safety testing standards for marijuana at all, but states like Colorado and Washington do.
The recommended limit for this type of material would be 10,000 colony-forming units per gram. Of the 4 samples that you submitted, 3 of them would not have passed that recommended limit. That doesn't mean this material necessarily is going to be injurious to anybody's health, but it's clearly not a a desirable situation to have a high level of microbial contamination.
The samples ranged from 12,000 to 20,000 to the Valentino OG, which had mold levels that were off the charts.
What we would call TNTC, too numerous to count.
Should they be pulled off the shelf?
I would think so, yes.
These former employees say it's clear Encanto Green Cross has a mold problem. What's not clear is how many other dispensaries have one too.
I think that our lawmakers need to really sit down and say, okay, we've taken the step of making this medication available for patients, but now we need to start controlling the quality of the medication that our patients in the state are receiving.
Encanto is the only dispensary we got complaints about, but mold is an industry-wide concern. And we've been in contact with the dispensary through a PR firm for the last 2 weeks, asking for information and an interview. Yesterday, the head of the dispensary agreed to sit down with us so we could give them the results. Does Encanto have a mold problem?
Not at all. So the pictures that you have received were from a terminated employee.
Encanto managing member Bill Brothers acknowledged they did find mold earlier this year from a leak, but he says it was never inside a cultivation room and claims it never touched the plants.
When the guard that was terminated reported it to us, we immediately, within 24 hours, notified management and remediation practices were put in place. We removed the drywall, we repaired the leak, and the system was restored.
I showed him the security guard's emails complaining about mold from January through March.
The mold was in a water purification chamber. It was repaired immediately. So
when was the immediate over this 3 months?
Within a few weeks.
He says the former employees we spoke with were fired for serious misconduct, not for their complaints. And Encanto had previously sent a cease and desist letter to the guard claiming breach of contract and other claims. Then we showed him the results.
The lab director said that he thought that cannabis that exceeded 10,000 colony-forming units should be pulled from the shelf. Will you remove any of this cannabis from
Absolutely
sale?
not. Yeah, absolutely not. There's no evidence or proof that we have a mold issue. None whatsoever. You don't have a solid care control and custody. You don't have a certified lab because none exists in the state of Arizona and there's no further regulations.
Brothers dismissed the lab's findings.
I don't know whether you're sending these samples to 7-Eleven, Quickie Mart, or Dr. Feelgood for testing.
He assured us that Encanto does its own internal testing, which the nonprofit has not provided us.
I have trouble reconciling the argument that we can trust some results, your internal employee paid results. We cannot trust outside results.
Oh no, I'm not asking you to trust my results. Okay. I'm asking me to trust my results. I'm the one authorized by the state of Arizona by a dispensary agent card to cultivate on behalf of the patients. You are not.
Brothers says he does support adding mandatory testing requirements statewide because he suspects problems at other dispensaries, not at Encanto. And he had a lot more to say. You can find more of our conversation on azfamily.com.